This conference will now be recorded.
Subscription, it will be great, so that you can follow along with the class and you can practice the same thing out there. So again, as I was telling, is free trial the only kind of a subscription? Not really. Azure also gives you something called as a pay as you go subscription. Pay as you go. So pay as you go is a very popular subscription which companies, individuals, a lot of people actually use this out. This is not free in nature. As the name indicates, not free in nature. This is like a postpaid connection. Good, please. See, AWS again, just to explain the difference between AWS and Azure, I'll ask you one more question. What is the difference between Airtel and Idea? Two different mobile carrier providers. Same way, both are cloud technologies. Yes, both are cloud technologies. The reason that I'm asking you is that just like we have two different companies who are giving you service connections for your mobile, these are two different companies that are giving you cloud provide. I mean, two different companies giving some space on the cloud. Again, AWS has its own advantages, Azure has its own advantages. So again, there are advantages, disadvantages. Again, there's a lot of competition going around between two cloud providers out there again. So again, same thing. Even if you go into AWS, if you learn Azure, go into AWS, you will have literally the same concepts out there, but the name is slightly different. That's it. The way you use it is slightly different. AWS is mostly on the open source. Open sources, they give a lot of free products well compared to Azure. So again, both are cloud providers only, both work in the same way. It's just that how they work. AWS needs Linux, Azure doesn't need Linux. Azure directly runs on, let's say, something like a GUI. So that's the difference between AWS and Azure as such. And coming here, I was telling that there is something called pay as you go. So if you look at this, if I say subscription and let's say create a new subscription out here, or go into sign up out here, say add a subscription, there is something called pay as you go. So pay as you go is one of the most popular model that is used in Azure, and pay as you go is just like a postpaid connection out here. The more you use, the more billing basically Azure will give you. And pay as you go has a monthly billing cycle, meaning if you start your pay as you go journey today, your bill will be generated on the 16th of, let's say, July, because this today is 16th of June. So on the 16th of July, you will be having a bill telling what did you use in the entire month, how many minutes of, let's say, different resources that you use, and how much bill you need to pay. And Azure will charge you on that particular credit card that you are using. That is what pay as you go actually gives you out there. So pay as you go mostly is a, let's say, paid subscription as such. And apart from pay as you go, again, pay as you go doesn't have an expiration. Even if you don't use it, even if you keep it like that, there is no expiration at all. Azure will give you a monthly bill of zero, no charge, nothing. How many ever months, how many ever years you want to keep it like that, not a problem. If you want to use it, you can again go ahead and use pay as you go. Again, one of the most popular questions what students really ask me is that what is the bill that gets generated if I go for a pay as you go? Again, it depends completely on what you create, depends completely on how you create your resources. For example, I use a pay as you go subscription. I have three batches that are running parallelly, and I use pay as you go subscription to create a lot of resources. I explain a lot of things over the Azure subscriptions out there. And what I do is that when I create something, when a class is done, I delete something. I delete the same thing what I created. So I don't keep a resource more than an hour. I'll also show you how to delete and all that stuff. We'll get into that. So if I do that, the monthly bill what I get is around 150 200 rupees. That's the monthly bill what I pay for Azure. That's what I really pay, let's say, for Azure on a monthly basis. So I never paid about 250 rupees. I never really paid up, let's say, about 250 rupees. But there are students who, let's say, did abundant amount of bills. Let's say, again, there was a really a very big bill that got generated at the end of the month. So it completely depends upon how you use it. It completely depends how you use it. So that's the reason I'm that's the reason my humble suggestion is don't go for pay as you go directly, because you're now learning about Azure. In a month you'll know what Azure is, how you're creating, what is the bill that that's getting generated, and etc. Based upon that, you can now decide whether you want to go for a pay as you go or you want to continue with a free trial and etc. So you can create a new free trial or new pay as you go and all these things. So that is pay as you go. There is another thing called free trial, and there is something, or there are many subscriptions out there available, something called Azure for students. And the reason that I'm telling Azure for students, again, this is for students studying in universities, studying students studying in universities where let's say you have a brother or a sister who's doing, let's say, something like a master's degree in computer science. They can avail this particular subscription called Azure for students, which is valid for 1 year. Azure is going to give you Azure is going to give you somewhere around 10,000 credits for the entire year. You can use that. There is something called Visual Studio Professional and Enterprise subscriptions that are offered by Azure, or enterprise subscriptions. This is something Azure. Sorry, I have a very bad throat today. Excuse me for that. So this is something that Azure gives you called Visual Studio Enterprise or Professional subscriptions. Again, for this, you'll need to subscribe to some products of Azure, or you'll have to be a trainer, let's say, with Microsoft, like me. So I'm a trainer with Microsoft. So if I go to my Azure account, if I go to, let's say, my Azure account out here, which is portal.azure.com, I'll be using this particular Azure account for, teaching you all, training you all, and etc. And if I go into my subscriptions, I have something called what? Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. I'm not using a free, neither am I using a pay. I'm using something known as a Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. And if I just say add something, it'll also show me what are all the eligible subscriptions that I can go ahead and add. Again, I can go ahead and add a free trail. I can go ahead and add, sorry, I can go ahead and add a pay as you go and all these things out. So this is what I get. Again, once you, let's say, go ahead and use your subscription, this is what you need to see. You need to see a free trial here. You need to see something called as a subscription ID, and you need to see that the status of the subscription is active or not. These are the three things that you need to verify. So these are the available subscriptions that are, let's say, that Azure kind of gives you out. So free trial, pay as you go, Azure in open, Azure students, Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, Visual Studio Professional subscription, a lot of things out here. But from an individual's perspective, from a company's perspective, two different subscriptions that, let's say, keep coming are free trial or pay as you go subscription out here. These are the two things that actually come in picture. So any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here that I can take? Can we create, okay, is there a difference between, I'll just take a couple of questions in the chat. Is there a difference between free trial and pay as you go? Yes, there is a difference between free trial and pay as you go. As I said, free trial is free in nature. There is no charge. But when you go for something called pay as you go, you'll have to pay a monthly billing cycle out here. Can we create multiple subscriptions under the same tenant ID? Very good question. Let's go there. Let's answer that. Just a second. Yeah, let's answer that. So let's go here. So this is the diagram of a tenant, something called as an Azure tenant or something called as an Azure Active Directory. I'm interchangeably using this as a tenant. So this is what I have. When I created an account with Azure, I had what? A tenant ID. This is what I got with a unique number and etc. After that, I went ahead and I created what? A subscription with Azure. And this subscription falls under a tenant ID. Meaning, for you to create an Azure subscription, firstly, you need to have a tenant, a valid tenant out here. This is what I mean to say by this. So this subscription is falling under a tenant. It's a parent and a child relationship under one tenant. Now the question was that under one tenant, can I create multiple subscriptions? Now I created one free trial. Can I create multiple subscriptions? Answer is yes. You can create multiple subscriptions provided it is not a free trial. You cannot go ahead and create another free trial. So for example, if I go into my subscription, I say add. I have a button called add. Though I have a subscription, it still says go ahead and add something here. I'll say add here, and it is now checking for eligibility and all these things. It will take a minute or so to give me all the subscriptions out here. In this list, I wouldn't have a free trial as such. So apart from free trial, I can go ahead create something called another pay as you go. Okay, in order to view this one, it's asking me to switch and etc. So I'll come back to this later. But yes, the short answer is yes, you can create multiple subscriptions under the same Azure tenant. So you can have multiple subscriptions provided it is not a free trial. Let's say you create a pay as you go and say PAG, pay as you go. This can also be a pay as you go. This can be a different thing like Azure for students or Visual Studio professional subscription, enterprise subscription, etc. Different types. Provided it is not a free trial, you are allowed to create multiple subscriptions under the same tenant. But the question is that why do I even want to create multiple subscriptions under the same tenant? One subscription is sufficient, right? Why do I even want to create so many subscriptions under the same tenant? What can be the use case scenario? Can anyone think about it? Why do you need even multiple subscriptions under the same tenant out here? Getting my point? You can create multiple subscriptions under the same tenant, provided it is not a free trial. But my question is that why do you even need multiple subscriptions? Can anyone think of a use case scenario why you need multiple, let's say, subscriptions? Any thoughts here for usage of data? But I can have one subscription using all the, let's say, data in the same subscription. Mhm. Right. Okay. Correct. Right. But let's say Amazon Prime. You talk about Amazon Prime, right? So using one Amazon account, you can go ahead and let's say watch all the movies and rent something using one ID. Then one ID is associated with one Amazon account. Organize. Great thought. Yes, in organization level, there is, let's say, multiple teams. Different teams needs multiple subscription. I will put it in a better way. Let's say this. You have an organization called Tata, right? You have an organization. I'm not telling you have a company. I'm telling you have an organization called Tata. Under Tata, there can be multiple companies. Tata Motors, Tata Steel, Tata Finance, Tata Capital, a lot of things out here. Now, what Tata is telling is that, you know what, I now want to move all my websites into Azure. I want to go into cloud. I want to start moving all my data into Azure. I'll say, great, go ahead and create something called as a tenant with Azure. So now Tata Motors will be given something called what? A tenant ID. Same like you and me, Tata Motors will also have something known as a tenant ID associated with it. Now Tata organization will have a tenant with it. Now it's telling that, you know what, I have multiple companies like Tata Motors, like Tata Steel, like Tata Finance and all these things. So multiple subsidiary companies. Steel. Let's say some company like XYZ. Can be anything in this particular place. Now Tata is asking Azure that, you know what, I have multiple employees working in my organization. There are Tata Steel employees, there are Tata Motors employees, there are Tata XYZ employees. And my requirement is that the employee of Tata Motors should only have the subscription access to Tata Motors. The employee of Tata Steel should only have Tata Steel. The employee of Tata XYZ should only have the access to XYZ out here. Is there a way how I can separate all these things? The answer here would be create multiple subscriptions, one for each and every company under you, so that employee of one company can only log into one particular subscription and not the other one. That's how you can go ahead and restrict or enable the access at a subscription level. Again, we'll talk about what are the different roles and responsibilities that you get in a subscription. How do you add a user and all these things? But in today's session, I just want to explain what is a tenant, what is a subscription, what is a need for multiple subscriptions out here, and how does a company or how can a company use this out. So mostly theory out here, and this model that we are talking about is called as a multi-subscriber model in Azure, because you have multiple subscriptions out here, and most of the companies or all of the companies that I worked with use this particular multi-subscriber model. Even within the company, you have multiple teams. You want to segregate between teams, you can go and create multiple subscriptions out here. So you can do these things out here using a tenant and subscription as such. So yes, any questions still here, guys? Anyone? Any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here that I can take?
Yeah, hello.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, actually, is this Services charge like that you told, right? If you give the credit card, they will charge the services by Azure.
Correct.
So the charge will be like if you create any services inside our account, they will charge.
Hmm.
Is it like
Correct.
the service will be up and down like that? If it is a service shutdown, they will not charge. If service is up, they will charge. Is it like that? Or creation itself, they will charge?
Good question. So, do you when you create a service, can you stop a service or can you start a service? It depends upon the service. A couple of services can be started and can be stopped. Most of, I mean, a couple of services cannot be, let's say, stopped. They will be, let's say, continuously running. So, depending upon the service you create. For example, let's say there is a service called virtual machine. If you create that service, you can stop that machine or you can stop that particular service. If you stop, there is no charge. But there is another service called storages. If you create that service,
Okay,
there is no option to stop it. You just have to store
correct.
data. So you'll have to, let's say, pay for, let's say, whatever time that service is created for. So it depends upon what is the service you go for.
Okay, 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 right. Okay.
Okay, what are the benefits of Azure? Why do we need Azure? What is it? Please explain in Telugu. I'm so sorry, I won't be able to explain this in Telugu. Reason being, there are a lot of non-Telugu students in this class, and also reason being, when you go into an organization, you'll have to start talking the language of English out there. Also, in order to explain all this, what do we need Azure and etc., please go ahead, please request for the demo classes that we were already recorded. Please look at that particular demo session as such. That will give you a very good context on what is Azure, why do we need Azure, what are the benefits of Azure, and all these things out here. Yes, any questions, guys? Any more questions that I can take? Again, I'm not going into practicality today on how to code, let's say, create all these things. That will become a little bit, let's say, overwhelming on top of it. But from tomorrow, please make sure, but at the end of tomorrow's class, please make sure to create a subscription, so that when we do some practice tomorrow, you can go ahead and, let's say, start practicing the same as such.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Good, Charan. Good, Charan.
Sir, will there be any like benefit difference in these subscriptions like free trial and pay as you go in use?
Definitely yes. Definitely yes. Will there be any benefits, or will there be any benefit difference between free trial and pay as you go? Yes, there is.
Yeah,
As in a free trial subscription, uh, Charan, can you please go on mute? I'm getting a little bit of disturbance from your end. I'll just explain your question.
yeah, done.
Thank you. So the question here is that, is there any benefit difference between, let's say, if I go to free trial, if I go to pay as you go, is there any difference? Yes, there is a difference. In free trial, there is a restriction on what is the capacity of resources that you can create. Again, talking about storages. In a free trial, let's say you can only create a storage service of 10 GB, let's say, capacity. In a pay as you go, it's unlimited. There's nothing. But is that sufficient? More than sufficient. Free trail is actually more than sufficient, because we not even store 10 GB in our free trails. We store it in KBs for our practice and all these things out. So yes. But to answer to your question, is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. But will that, let's say, really matter when we practice? No, it doesn't. Does that answer your question, Charan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Uh, Vasant is raising his hand. Vasant, do you have a question? Can I take something
Yes,
from
sir.
you? Go ahead,
Yes, sir.
please.
Uh,
Go ahead.
so you have displayed that when you apply for free trail application, it would reflect as free trail, and
Correct.
when it comes to your Azure account, it displays
Right.
as Visual Studio. So
Correct.
is it like one of the plans you select and in a similar way it would display here, or is it something altogether different thing?
No, it's not a plan that I selected. So I am a Microsoft certified trainer. So when I cleared my certification exam, this is what Azure gave me out here. So this is a Visual
Okay,
Studio Interface
understood.
subscription. This is a plan.
Got
Yes,
it.
you can tell this is a plan, but this got assigned to me.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Right. Within 90 days, yes. You can still retrieve the data. Yes. Again, you can not pay your money at the max for 1 month. After that, your credit card will be auto charged if you are in a pay as you go subscription. Your credit card will be auto charged. There's something called auto charge, right? Azure will auto charge your credit card out there. You do not have a money, then your account will get disabled. But you can still go and retrieve your data for 90 days. Yes. Yes, any more questions, guys, before I can close for today? Again, we'll be looking at each and every service out here. We'll be starting with user management from tomorrow on what is the subscription, how can you add multiple users, what are the roles that you can have to let's say assign to a user, and all these things out. This is something that we'll be starting from tomorrow.